What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Freedom Hacks, and we're here at episode number 21. Now, I have a confession to make. I didn't make a single episode last week at all, and I'm going to share with you, I'm going to be transparent and share with you one of the things that comes up for me a lot as an entrepreneur, and I want to know whether or not it happens to you and whether you can relate to it. But for me, I'm a creator. Right? Like for me, I'm always coming out with ideas, strategies, solutions. It's just how my mind works and operates. And last week was a very operational type week, right? Like I had a lot of learning to do. I had a lot of creating to do. I had new tools to learn how to use. I had different things, systems and stuff to create for staff members, for other projects that were running, building out my membership site for my new program. It was very operational. And I find that when I'm more focused on the operation side of stuff, the creativity doesn't flow the same way. And I almost lose confidence in having that topic or having that subject that I just want to share with people and dive into. So pretty much besides my podcast last week, I did zero content. And one of the things I want to talk to you about today in today's episode is, do you require a level of significance and recognition? And do you operate to get those things in your life versus operating without needing them? All right, and why is there a difference between the two? And what I've found in dealing with a lot of people, from businesses to personal self-development to weight loss and transformational and even mindset space, I find that people that crave recognition or significance are always coming from a place of lack. Right? You watch them in a conversation, you'll be talking to them about something to do with you, or they'll even start a conversation asking something about you, and then suddenly it becomes about them. They'll even cut other people off just to talk about them, right? Even though they were the ones that asked you a question about yourself in the first place. And you have to ask yourself, why do they need that, right? It's the same with constantly needing approval. Right? And I was somebody that for years I needed that because I never got it as a kid. I never got any recognition. I never got any approval for what I did. If anything, I got the opposite and got told how shit I was at things, right? But different story. So when you need those things in your life, the reason why I think they come from a place of lack is because you don't give it to yourself first. Right? You always need other people's approval to make a decision because you're afraid you might get it wrong or you might look bad. You always make things about you because you don't like who you are. That might sound like a really harsh statement, but I found it to be true so many times that for me, it is a truth that I need to share, is that they're constantly making things about them because deep down, they need you to make them feel important because they don't feel important themselves. They need others to give them a sense of purpose and recognition because they can't give it to themselves because deep down, they don't like who they are. And one of the telltale signs is they start saying things like, I'm comfortable in my skin. I'm happy with who I am. Things are great. All the time, they're fine and they're great, right? And you might think that those things are normal and signs of somebody who's happy, but I've actually found the opposite to be true. Those are the stories that mask how they're really feeling about themselves inside. And their actions prove it all, right? That level of interrupting people, that level of always having to be the center of the conversation, or they'll be at an event for somebody else, but somebody didn't recognize them enough, and then suddenly they didn't get a level of significance, and it suddenly became about them when it was somebody else's event, or somebody else's story or somebody else's conversation, and it became about them. I've got a great example. I had somebody that literally hadn't spoken to me for ages, and then we moved house and they're like, oh, you didn't even tell me. Normally you tell me these things. And I'm like, well, you didn't ask, for one. And two, how does me moving have anything to do with you? Do you know what I mean? Why not just be happy for me and that's the end of the conversation? So have a look at where you see that in your own life versus the fact that when you are truly happy with who you are, when you know that what you are speaking is coming from a place of integrity, it's coming from a place of self-love. You don't say things like, I'm happy in my skin and I'm comfortable with who I am. And the reason why you don't say that shit is because you don't need to. right? You don't need to. You don't even have those thoughts anymore. You don't need to hear yourself or convince yourself of those things anymore because you don't even have those thoughts, right? They're not even a factor for you anymore. It's that same with that sense of significance and recognition. You can go into any relationship, any situation, and it doesn't need to be about you. You can have a conversation with somebody that never ever comes back to you. And it doesn't matter because in that moment, you're just listening to somebody else. You're allowing them to have their own journey, their own experience, and you don't need to chime in because you don't need that recognition or that significance. You just don't need it, right? And it's often why a lot of these people are happy when you don't need that stuff. You're happy being on your own sometimes. You're happy having conversations with random people at any time that don't revolve around you. It's the same in work. It's the same in the interactions you're having in your relationships, right? That you're happy to let the other person speak. You're happy to ask questions all day long and then dive into those questions because you enjoy watching somebody else enjoy talking about themselves. You get satisfaction knowing that you're giving somebody your 100% attention and presence. And I see this with a lot of parents all the time too, that they almost need that level of reinforcement and significance from their children. But yet they don't give their children the number one thing they need, which is time and being present enough to enjoy those moments with them and to just allow them to talk and be kids and say some of the craziest shit that you'll ever hear, right? But it's also some of the coolest stuff that you'll ever hear. So whether it's in your life, whether it's you personally, whether it's somebody that you know, okay, have a look at whether or not you are craving that external recognition and significance. And don't get me wrong, right? Recognition is great. You know, some people will do more for recognition than they will ever do for themselves. All right, but what I would love you to grasp from this episode is the fact that you don't need anybody else's recognition. You don't need to somehow convince yourself and put yourself in front of others or make things about you for a sense of significance. You need to give yourself that own sense of significance in the first place. And when you can do that, the best part is shit gets quiet, right? And you'll know the person I'm talking about, right? You will have a person like this in your life. It's never quiet. When you hang around them, they talk about themselves so much, it's exhausting. Right? Even if the conversation or something wasn't about them at all and you were like off on this far tangent, they somehow bring it back to them and about whatever it was that they wanted to talk about, right? You know this person, so recognize them first, but also relate it back to you and whether or not you're approaching things with that sense of need for recognition and significance above providing it for yourself. Because when you can provide it for yourself, like I said, everything gets quiet. You get to enjoy just being, right? And you don't have to convince yourself and come up with these stories about how you're okay and you're fine and things are great. It just doesn't matter because you don't even think about that shit anymore in that way. That was today's episode. I would love to know whether or not you fall into the same trap I did that I shared in the beginning of this episode. And also, what did you connect with today in terms of recognition and significance? And how does it show up for you, or how does it show up with other people that are in your life? And I will look forward to committing to doing this again tomorrow.